Well, it was mentioned that I was on, when I first came to Indy, I was on the Wenck and O'Brien show on X103. That was in 1996. And the question I often get, managing editor of NUVO, Wenck and O'Brien show, how does that guy get to be this guy, right? Well, it's a good question. It's a fair question. I was born in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, went to Syracuse University. When I got out, I started doing stand-up comedy. I had a degree in fine arts. I know, right. No, my parents are still thrilled. I opened for Drew Carey, who was nice but weird. I opened for Ray Romano, who was weird but not nice. I opened for Sam Kinison, who was amazingly nice and amazingly weird. And I opened for Dennis Miller, who was an ass. I did that for a couple of years, and finally one day I got a gig on a local radio station, a rock station called Kicks FM in Syracuse on the Fat Man's Wake Up Service, which, if you think about it, is a horrible mental picture. I did that for about a year. It was a rock station, and things were going great until the station got sold and they changed format and fired everybody. So I bounced around Pennsylvania for a while, did a couple of small market radio shows there, and eventually I wound up in Pittsburgh on a station called The Revolution. This was the first alternative rock station in Pennsylvania. We were the first station to play Bulls on Parade by Rage Against the Machine. It was awesome, and about a year later they sold the station and switched the format to smooth jazz and fired everybody. So I bounced around for a while, a little longer, and wound up here in Indianapolis on X103, right down the hall from the Bob and Tom show in that building out there on Fall Creek. And we were doing great. The Wenck and O'Brien show, you remember it? We were awesome. We beat Howard Stern. We were in second place behind Bob and Tom. And we went to see the general manager and we said, hey man, we're doing great. How about some more money? And he said, all the money goes to Bob and Tom. So we went, fine. We got a job offer in San Jose, California to play 80s music. So we went to San Jose, California and stayed there for about a year, and they sold the station, flipped the format to Spanish language and fired everybody. So I came back to Indianapolis to be on Radio Now, which was a pop station. And I came back in January of 2001 with O'Brien and a producer named Cassie Bannister. And everything was going great. And then on September 11th, 2001, a group of Al-Qaeda terrorists flew 4 planes, 3 into iconic buildings, 1 into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, about 4 miles from the hospital where I was born. And I was charged with the task of telling my listeners about that specific event as it happened on television. On September 12th, 2001, I learned how to do a talk show. And I'm very proud of what we did over the course of the next couple of weeks. Because there was a lot of bandwagons we could have gotten on at that moment. We could have gotten on the Islamophobe bandwagon, and we didn't. We talked to religious leaders from all sides of the spectrum. We talked to a lot of different people, and we talked to listeners, which was most important to me, about how they were feeling and what they were going through as they were trying to sort this thing out. I don't know if you remember how you felt then, but it was one of the most confusing periods of time I have ever lived through. It was awful. It was horrendous, and I hated every minute of doing that show. But then when we went back to music, I realized that there was something I missed about sharing and imparting that information to the audience. And I had the chance a few years later when WIBC, which was down the hall from the radio stations I had worked at MS, offered me the position of afternoon drive. And at that time, the program director wanted to balance Rush Limbaugh and Greg Garrison with some real news in morning and afternoon drive. So I tried to do this very ersatz, all things considered, one-man band kind of thing. And it went all right. We did okay. We had sponsors. We had listeners. It was going well. And then the folks who ran WIBC decided they were going to do a research project. There's 2 ways you can do a research project in radio. You can ask the people who aren't listening, or you can ask the people who are listening. Now, I'm of the position that if you want to find out how to get more listeners, you ask the people who aren't listening. Okay. They didn't do that. They asked the people who were listening. So the people who were listening were really enjoying Rush Limbaugh and Greg Garrison. Ed Wenck, not so much. So they gave me a couple of options. And I had told the general manager there, I said, Charlie, I'm not going to become a little Limbaugh or a little Dana or a little Greg Garrison. I can't do it for a couple of reasons. Number one, it ain't me. And number two, you try and set up a false narrative for several years and see how well you can remember your lies as you tell them day after day after day. Well, when the research came out, our program director then immediately jetted for Houston, Texas. He wanted no part of this. They fired the news director shortly thereafter, and they jettisoned ABC News for Fox News. And they told me that they were going to move in a different direction. And I said, well, actually, you already did. Because I'm of the opinion, and you can disagree with me if you like, and we can have a beer afterward, and we'll talk about the Colts. But I'm of the opinion that Fox News is essentially a misnomer. The first part's right. They're definitely owned by Fox. The second part, not really accurate. Do they deliver news so much as manufacture outrage? I don't know. We can talk about it later. Be that as it may, I was transitioned, that's a lovely word for being reassigned, transitioned into a sales position at MS Communications, which I did fairly effectively for a few months until one day I got a little Facebook message from my friend Jim Poyser, who was managing editor at NUVO, and it said, dude, I quit my job. And laughingly I wrote back, can I have it? And we had a conversation that lasted for a little while, and we talked about all I had done and all that I had done on WIBC and how much I'd learned about journalism from working with the fine folks who are still in the WIBC newsroom to this day, Eric Berman and Ray Steele and Reed Parker and all those other fine folks, Stan Lear, great group of people. And he said, look, I'm not the guy who makes the decision, but I'll vouch for you. And sure enough, on October 1st, I wound up becoming the managing editor of NUVO. And here's why this is so important to me personally. There's a thing now called editorial transparency. And what that means, simply put, is that we tell you what side of the bread that we butter every day. It's pretty obvious when you read the Voices columns up front in NUVO, where we stand. But we tell you when we're giving you opinion, and we also tell you when, you know, we're poking the bear a little bit. Fox News's slug line is fair and balanced, and I don't think that's accurate. NUVO's slug line is Indy's alternative voice, and I think that is accurate, and I'm proud to be a part of it. Thanks a lot.